Well, thank you, Speaker, and I am pleased today to stand and give my perspectives on why I personally, and I know a number of my colleagues, voted against this budget. This Prime Minister advised Justin Trudeau and his ongoing Liberal government to construct and keep the roadblocks and red tape that have decimated Canada's ability to compete for investment. As an example, Nutrien's recent announcement is a huge blow to Saskatchewan's export of the best potash in the world. My Prince Albert colleagues summed it up. Nutrien didn't pick the U.S. because they wanted to. They picked the U.S. because Canada made it too slow, too expensive, and too unpredictable to build here. The U.S. made it easy. That's the whole story. Canada's west coast has structural bottlenecks. Vancouver's North Shore depends on one rail bridge, a major choke point. Longview has already got ready rail, a redeveloped berth, and immediate expansion capacity. Nutrien ran 30 criteria. They compared rail rates, freight costs, construction costs, and regulatory risk. Longview, Washington outperformed every Canadian port. Canada's permitting system kills projects. BC port approval takes 5 to 10 years with open-ended requirements. In the US, the process runs on fixed timelines and measured in months. Transportation now costs more than mining. Industry analysis shows shipping is the largest cost in potash. So Nutrien built where logistics are cheaper and faster, and that isn't Canada. Labor, carbon policy, and regulation all push investment south. The U.S. offers predictable labor, lower build costs, and no 170 per ton industrial carbon tax. Investors follow certainty, and Canada does not offer it under this government. Governments reacted after the decision. Ottawa and BC said they were disappointed after Nutrien picked Longview, while Saskatchewan reminded everyone this is the second potash terminal lost since 2016 because of BC's system being too slow and this government not acting. The bottom line, Nutrien didn't abandon Canada. Liberal policies pushed the investment out, and the U.S. simply opened the door. If we can't even secure a port for the resources that we dominate globally, what else are we going to lose? C5 gives full exception to these regulations for nation-building projects only. So he has no excuse, the Prime Minister, for not getting a pipeline built from Alberta to the BC Northwest Coast, even while these same laws still cause other potential private development and investment, nation-building opportunities to remain out of the reach, as U.S. tariffs also continue to cause job losses. Algonquin Steel, as an example, 1,000 workers this week. But the PM has made it clear he won't do his job to squelch the option of a veto, and thus signals failure to potential proponents wanting to build a pipeline. And he continued to greenlight immigration, compounding the shortage in affordable homes, access to health care and jobs for immigrants who came to Canada the right way to work hard to become productive citizens, and especially for young Canadians who are told they will never have the opportunity to own their own home or save for their own futures. A minimal tax cut for 20 million Canadians does not begin to offset the impact of inflation on the highest cost of essentials, let alone the interest payments on our debt. Canadian families will be out $5,000 in the trade-off this year. This minuscule tax cut gives the government a misleading talking point that only puts a pinky Band-Aid on a huge wound. The wound of the loss of purchasing power and the burden of more hidden taxes that the government tells Canadians to believe are only in their heads. Industrial carbon tax, 17-cent per litre fuel standard tax, the billion-dollar food packaging tax, the inflation tax created by too much, actually imaginary money with too few goods to buy. The budget fails to cut taxes on work, home building, investment, and energy by not reducing personal income tax for low-income workers, incentivizing investment in Canada by reducing capital gains tax, and not cutting home building taxes or permits and GST on all new home builds. It fails to stop the inflationary tax by unlocking more resource development and revenue. They should be cutting wasteful spending on bureaucracy, consultants, corporate welfare, foreign aid, and false refugee claimants. Programs that fall short for those who were assured assistance are temporary, piecemeal, handouts from a government that should be unleashing our economy and restoring affordability, rather than growing the number of Canadians who cannot afford basic essentials. They are choosing to give these supports, as they call them, which are simply stopgaps that don't provide long-term independence and prosperity for Canadians. Over and over again, they say they're investing in Canadians, when what they are doing is creating the issues that are making their lives very difficult, and then providing interim emergency supports that do not bring the wealth to this country that Canadians need and want to be self-sufficient. The Liberal government has created the very crisis circumstances that they are falsely claiming that they're fixing. The Canadian Dental Association had their days on the Hill this past week and exposed some issues with the Canadian Dental Care Program that are causing confusion and disappointment for patients and doctors. Misleading deadlines. I had one lady, elderly senior, who got her dentures 100% covered, but she renewed the program at the beginning of the month that she still had 30 days in to make her claim. And because she renewed when they said to, her amount that she got reimbursed was only $40. What happens then? The government made unexpected adjustments to the awards, and they're denying certain claims without transparency, and dentists are carrying outstanding billings for these people who cannot afford to pay up front what they thought they were having covered. So there are 9 million Canadians enrolled in this program, finding out the hard way that there are issues there. The federal government should get out of the way of investment and ensure Canadian workers, this is really important, build national infrastructure projects directly without Brookfield and other players getting subsidies from our tax dollars to hire Canadians in our own country. Talk about fleecing Canadian taxpayers. Duff Conacher from Democracy Watch warned that our Prime Minister could personally profit from massive federal infrastructure spending tied to his substantial investments, including but not limited to Brookfield. And this is something that just causes me to look at this government and say there is no way they should have the privilege to bring forward any budgets in the future that cause this kind of self-sufficiency for those who are making money at the expense of Canadians. We know that there are 1,900 Brookfield assets that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, did not submit to his ethics screen. And there are many, but here's at least 3 major Liberal projects in Canada's 2025 budget involving Brookfield. The Build Canada Homes Initiative ties $36 billion to Brookfield for modular housing. This is housing that the PM foreshadowed on April 8th, 2025, over 7 months ago, as the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, saying prefab and modular housing are the way of the future. Well, a 19-year-old first-time voter shared with me that he and his friends were excited to vote for the leader of the official opposition to become the next Prime Minister. Later, texting his friends, he said, they're changing their minds. So I asked him to ask them why. Well, they said that during the election campaign, the Prime Minister told young Canadians to their face, we will build homes you can afford. I said, okay, explain to them. This is called an open-ended sentence that lets you finish the thought with what you think it's defining. So ask them if what they heard was the government will build homes they can afford to rent or buy. Eyes grew wide and brows furrowed. They thought he was going to fix things so they could afford to buy a home. So who's going to have the investment in their homes? Young Canadians or Brookfield and the Prime Minister? So yes, Brookfield has many interests and contracts in Liberal nation-building projects and generating billions in stock profit. This arrangement is about conflict of interest, especially given the PM's significant financial holdings in Brookfield. Canadians deserve to know all the details on how the Prime Minister is using his office to put Brookfield and personal profits ahead of Canadians' trust. The premise of this budget is to limit Canadians' options for their futures while he and his friends continue to profit while bleeding our country dry.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, you get the theme. Personal attacks, character assassination, and misinformation. You know, it's interesting. She posed a question, and this deal with a question that was just posed previously, and that was in regards to the veterans. You know, the Conservatives try to give the impression that the government is cutting back $4 billion. What they don't tell you, Mr. Speaker, is that's a $4 billion saving because we used to pay $8 a gram for medical marijuana, and now it's being reduced to $6. Only the Conservatives would argue that you should continue to pay more than what the market is providing for. There's where the $4 billion is. But they tried to give the impression that we're cutting back on veterans. The Conservatives know that's not true. A real cut is when their leader cut and closed 9 veterans' offices across Canada.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll gladly send over an article that describes exactly where that $4 billion is going, Mr. Speaker, and a portion of it is in regard to cannabis, but I guarantee it is far from being the total amount of the $4 billion. And let's talk about those offices that were closed. They were closed on the recommendation of the bureaucrats who said that they were not being used extensively. Did we shut down the services? No. They were moved to other places, as in Regina, in my riding, to one of the malls, to the service center there. When they moved it back downtown where they had to go up 4 floors and there was bulletproof glass and hard to park, they said, why did they do that, Cathay? We love going to the mall where we could get our mail, have coffee, get our groceries, and go see Veterans Affairs.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Regina Louvain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my colleague from Saskatchewan's speech. One question I do have for her is, during this budget, they talked about investment in the future. There's an operating budget and an investment budget. And the PBO, who the Liberals do not like, said actually $90 billion in the investment budget should actually be in the operating budget. So their deficit actually skyrocketing past $78 billion if you add that $90 billion. And the PBO said that himself. What does my colleague think about the misinformation coming from the Liberals about what investment actually looks like when it should be in operating and not that $90 billion in the investment budget?
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Well, I thank my colleague for that question because it's obvious that this government does not care about telling the truth to Canadians about the true state of our democracy, about the true state of our economy. And in addition to that, it appears that they're very intentional in doing that misleading of Canadians, so that is why we need to remove this government and have Canadians have a Prime Minister who truly is a servant of the people.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let's do another fact check. We had a member of the Conservative Party indicate earlier that that the government was going to be closing down the RCMP depot, and that's what, in fact, the member was hearing. I have heard nothing of that nature. I'm wondering if the member would be able to provide any evidence whatsoever that the Conservative Party has that would say that the RCMP depot is going to be closing down in Regina.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Definitely that was something that was being mused over. And what's wonderful, if the member would like to listen to my answer, is that whenever Canadians get upset, and I must say, in my province, they've expressed themselves well throughout the whole decade that I've been here, that this government tries to drop little things in as a possibility and then has to reverse their stand, as with Remembrance Day wreaths, as with chaplains being able to pray at a Legion Remembrance Day service.
We have time for one quick question. Questions and comments. Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague through you. My question is simple. It's short. We talked a lot about Brookfield. How is it dangerous and concerning with respect to ethics that the Prime Minister could put his own interests first rather than those of the people?
For Yorkton Melville in 30 seconds or less.
Well, that's the crux of the problem that I've been pretty well focusing on entirely in my concerns around this budget. When you have a Prime Minister who blatantly puts his money in offshore accounts, who blatantly refuses to admit that there's 1,900 different organizations that he is profiting from, we know that this Prime Minister does not have the best interests of Canadians at heart.